pröva att köra lite PvP kanske. Jag vet inte om det är typ det tråkigaste tycker jag. Köra PvP.
Så ser om jag får igång Dead and Buried. Det är typ en western style shooter typ. Som har massa multiplayer och shit också. Det är ganska roligt.
Aha.
Då kan man antingen köra co-op mot en massa typ hordes av fiender ungefär som man ska defenda mot. Eller så kan man köra en shootout med ett lag mot ett annat lag typ.
Aha.
Det är ganska hilarious. Det är en stor nackdel dock att vara sittande och spela för man behöver kunna ta cover och shit typ.
I'm leaving Operation Forge in the hands of Soraya Hawthorne, also King.
Vilket är svårt om man sitter ner och sitter man där man sitter. Ganska roligt. Kolla om det funkar. Alltså.
Shit. Alltså vad fan. Min jävla respawn bara startar om flera gånger. Nej.
Funkade länken eller?
Vilken länk?
Skicka den.
Jag väntar.
All the paths to the rest of the base are shut tight, but get me to a console, and I'll take care of that.
Jag startar typ så här heroic mission just. Första gången jag kör det och det går inte bra kan jag säga.
Sometimes the best way to spring a trap is to spring the trap.
Alternatively, don't be there when it springs. We'll have to try that next time.
One down. Alltså det här är inte meningen att man ska köra på en.
Mm.
Kan det inte vara. Har slut. Men shit. Där är han. Fickan.
Har du kommit in?
Nej.
Jag kommer bara ha den här upppackad typ i kväll och imorgon kanske. Sen måste jag flytta
Vadå
bort
för
allt.
Vadå för något?
Oculusen.
Jaha, vadå för?
Sen kommer föräldrarna hem igen. Då måste jag flytta bort datorn från vardagsrummet.
Ja, man kan inte köra Oculus sen framför datorn.
Nej,
Alltså.
jag har ingen plats där uppe. Jag sitter fett trångt.
Thanks for moving that tank out of the way. And for that solar fuel cell.
Jag skulle typ slå sönder allt.
There's an exhaust vent nearby, but I don't know how long you want to hang on to that thing.
Hur fan ska jag komma dit då? Ah. Uff.
kommer in eller ska jag stänga av?
Jag håller på att göra ett heroic mission. Det finns ingen tid. Så du kan stänga av om du vill.
Okej.
Jag tog den.
Nice work. That should take care of the barrier.
Vad ska jag göra? Finten. Där hamnar. Oh. Ja. Oh. Nej! Så missade jag att ställa mig bakom. Vänta bak här.
Zahn's lieutenants aren't messing around. Think we've seen the last of them?
He's bound to have more. Insecure men tend to surround themselves with others like them.
Cade, anything to add?
Nope, she's totally right, which is why I work alone.
Well, this looks familiar.
Yeah, funny story about the Oroban.
Cabal and their weird ship names. Think it was the Orobas Victura.
Yeah, that one. Zahn moved in after you put Thumos out to pasture. It's in there somewhere.
Nej, jag ska käka lite grann. Jag kommer nog komma in senare igen. Om du är kvar.
Mm. Ja, jag ska dra på toan och fixa lite mat och skit också faktiskt.
Kör.
Bill Nye was once just a humble mechanical engineer turned comedian who decided to make a children's science TV show. If you were growing up in the 90s in one of the shittiest and most underfunded and creationist overrun education systems in the Western world, this man all but was your science teacher. After his show ended, he became an advocate for scientific literacy. He had many high-profile debates with both creationists and global warming deniers. But then, he suddenly became a crazy, corrupted, Swedish shill.
But Bill, not you!
Look, I know that so many people are starting to catch this SJW virus, but I never knew that it would be my dearest Bill.
He made me angry.
I'm just trying to get my head around it. Maybe you can tell me. It seems as though the show had absolutely nothing to do with science.
He made me very, very angry.
There's only two genders. I don't need to do research.
You are a representative of science, and you just shit over all of it.
The world Bill Nye wishes to build seems to include rampant sexual promiscuity, dismissal of science in lieu of feelings, encouragement of sodomy.
Alright, I think I went a little overboard on that.
Bill Nye got a new show for Netflix, Bill Nye Saves the World, a show dedicated to furthering the work he did all those years ago, covering new topics and the changes to the old ones since that old show went off the air in 1998. And on one episode, entitled The Sexual Spectrum, he delved into explorations of sex and gender, and if there's one thing a true man of reason would never do, it's think about that stuff at all. I mean, he might be infected by feminism?
Who is this empowering? It's empowering ignorant women.
How dare ignorant people feel empowered? We can't have that happening, said the man in the Trump hat.
And as a feminazi swidge myself, I figured I'd see what all the fuss was about. Let's check the episode out, shall we?
I already saw the episode before pre-recording this.
For a supposed Bill Nye's Gone to the Dog's Nightmare Freak Show, he doesn't even really say all that much, in my opinion.
He does a decent baseline covering of the topic and the general state of our understanding of sex, gender, attraction, and expression, and how all these things are essentially separate spectrums from one another, but he doesn't really go enough into the science behind it as I'd like, and he doesn't really say anything new to someone who's already read about this stuff, so to me it was kind of disappointing. The segment in Korea was interesting, and it's fascinating seeing a culture with different approaches to gender norms dealing with new approaches to expression in its own way. But there's also a bunch of segments that restate what was already said, or which I feel should be kinda obvious by now to most people, in such a reductionist or over-the-top way that it feels like they were trying way too hard to make the topic quote-unquote entertaining, when the point of Bill Nye is that science is entertaining, you know?
Science rules.
The musical number with Rachel Bloom, who made Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which might just be the funniest show of the last 2 years, is pretty good, but says very little. And even when watching it at the time, I knew it was the thing people would point to and go, how dare you? This is so silly, I clipped this bit out of context, and now it's so over the top. My goodness, this comedy music bit, it doesn't make any careful references to studies. And there's an animated segment with ice creams that mixes its metaphors a little too much. Like, you have this vanilla ice cream, right? And he simultaneously stands for, like, oppressive religious extremism and practices like conversion therapy, but he also, like, stands for heterosexuality and people who don't accept the existence of other ones at the same time. The segment conflates physical sex, attraction, and gender expression in a way that becomes confusing and actively makes the earlier segments trying to explain the issue as simply as possible harder to understand. Then, like, they're discussing favorite flavors of ice cream when they are ice cream. Like, is this a metaphor for sex or cannibalism? Do they eat each other? Is cannibalism legal in this ice cream-based universe? How do they digest each other? Do the ice creams fuck? Why would you do this?
This episode gets across a lot of simple ideas lots of people have hopefully seen and heard before, like that trans people exist, or that other physical, mental, psychological, and personality-based aspects differentiate people far more than the genitals or chromosomes they happen to be born with. The other piece of terminology I expect a lot of people to be tripped up on is the part where he brings up the concept of gender expression. The more uninformed view of concepts like masculinity and femininity is that they're linked directly to a person's gender, and along with that their physical sex or biology, creating the expectation for prescribed roles and behaviors based on a person's sex or gender or sexual preferences. But the reality is that we see a broad range of behaviors that take place often irrespective of these things. This is something the LGBT community is far more ahead with than the mainstream. Take, for example, the concepts of butch and femme in lesbian culture. These are words used to describe the personalities of lesbian women. You can be a woman attracted to other women, but still express this very differently from other women attracted to women. Gender expression is a wider acknowledgement of this sort of behavior, and the idea that a person's personality is not something inherent to the other aspects of their physical biology, gender, or sexuality. To put it another way, I might be male, and you might be male. But regardless, we both express maleness in different ways from each other and have to define for ourselves what it means to even be male in the first place. These sides of human behavior are fascinating and still developing fields of study, and the way they're glossed over by being talked about very briefly or turning up in the form of a mint chocolate chip ice cream fails to really get these ideas across very well, either in terms of summing up a subject you might be already familiar with or in introducing it to you for the first time.
It gave a rudimentary, comedically slanted description of sex, gender, identity, and expression, but feels in itself a little too reductionist to be useful. It basically tells you that these things exist, which, yeah.
I have my own criticisms of the show, but I expect the rational raisins and smarty-pants scarbands of the world to have their own very different problems with the show.
Let's look at a few in more detail and see if their problems hold water. Here's a video by one of YouTube's most prominent skeptics, and you know he's skeptical because he put it in his name, Armored Skeptic. I'm going to be using clips from both his video and various episodes of Bill Nye's new show. So to make sure I'm not taking anything out of context, I highly recommend that you watch his video and the show for yourself first. The links are in the description, and buy Netflix.
The first segment is a skit where his persona argues with another version of himself, voiced by himself. Mondo respect, I think the guy's onto something with that. He goes into an episode-by-episode breakdown, summing up his opinion on each. The episode that deals with sex and gender is episode 9, but I'll briefly point out some aspects of Skeptic's perspective, God that's a tongue twister, on earlier episodes that I regard as illustrative of problems with his approach.
Episode 1 was all about climate change, and this is how he talks about it.
The first episode is about climate change, and I was a little apprehensive about this one because this is Bill's subject, but it was great. Bill was a little awkward in front of the live audience, but that only really added to the charm. He doesn't get too political, he doesn't use too much hyperbole, he demonstrates how climate change is affecting the planet today, and even innovative ways that engineers are dealing with these problems. I even liked the panel. He had some guy on who said that he wanted the entire United States to be renewable, and another guy on the panel was like, no, that's a fantasy world. It was great, it was really well balanced. I mean, no, he didn't have any climate change skeptics or anything, but you know what I mean.
He congratulates the panel for being well balanced. The focus is on balance, on not taking a side.
So, is balance what we saw in that panel?
Professor Mark Jacobson outlines that while it may sound impossible to some people, it is absolutely possible to make mankind's energy infrastructure completely renewable. The main barriers are social and political. You can see how this science professor might have to risk getting a bit political here, you know, to fix the part where we all might die if it's not taken care. You can see how politics might have to come into it at some point. Meanwhile, Richard Martin, my main man Dick Mart, thinks it's utopian and unrealistic to think that, even though it's literally possible to actually do. There are many people in the world who dismiss ideas that actually could work in practice, and we know that because it's possible to check, because they've decided it's too utopian. He all but complains that there's no magic money tree. Where have we heard that before? He offers an alternative in the form of nuclear energy. Jacobs retorts that the time it would take to get the many thousands of nuclear power plants required to supplant traditional ones approved and built would fail to correct our impact on the climate in time.
Dick Mart has no retort to this. He just kind of continues harping on how crazy it would be to do the thing that we statistically could do if we got our shit together. Like, bro, you're trying to convince, like, millions of Americans to allow dozens of thousands more nuclear plants into their backyard? You gotta fucking explain how it'll work.
I even liked the panel. He had some guy on who said that he wanted the entire United States to be renewable, and another guy on the panel was like, no, that's a fantasy world. It was great. It was really well balanced.
According to Skeptic, the panel is one person saying, I want America to be this really wishful thinking pie-in-the-sky thing, like to have the entire United States be renewable, and another person being more realistic and dismissing it as a fantasy, something Skeptic has
Less than a week after the start of Shia LaBeouf's non-stop anti-Trump livestream, He Will Not Divide Us, the space has become an online target for Donald Trump supporters and neo-Nazis. BuzzFeed has detailed reports on groups congregating on 4
sex for favors, secrets, cover-ups, corruption. I've heard things that'll blow your mind, and now I think it's time you get the whole story. I'm Jesse Ventura, and this is Quinspiracy Theory.
The video I was originally going to upload tonight is gone. I've scrapped it, it's deleted. I've decided to do something different because of this. What you're looking at is a copyright claim against a YouTube user by the name of Mundane Matt on a video called Hell Hath No Fury Like a Lover Scorned. That copyright claim was filed by Zoe Quinn, the person who is the subject of the video itself. Now, in the copyright claim, she had stated that he'd used a still image of her game, Depression Quest, which she's a creator of, and that she had ownership over that, and that's why the video needed to be pulled down, because it was infringing on her intellectual property. But the truth is, it had nothing to do with that. The image Matt used in his video, and it was just one image. I want to show you his typical format. This is a typical video that Mundane Matt will put up. You have a still image in the background, you have a transparent barrier on the left-hand side with a title, and he talks over it. And that is exactly what Hell Hath No Fury was. It had a still image in the background, a transparent barrier, title, and he talked over it. Now the image he used was a publicly available image. This game is out on Steam. You can see these images. They've been used in news articles, they've been posted on websites, they're publicly available through the company on Steam itself. So her copyright claim had nothing to do with him using her intellectual property. What it had to do with was suppressing information from getting out. And that's something that's been going on now for the last 3 days since this began. Sites like Reddit and NeoGAF and even 4chan on certain boards have suppressed this from being talked about because of the implications it has in the gaming industry. Now, what started all of this off was a WordPress blog called the Zoe Post. This was put up by a man named Aaron, who is Zoe Quinn's ex-boyfriend. In the entirety of the blog post, which is extraordinarily long, he goes through a laundry list of complaints as to why the relationship failed and why he's upset. Now, these all seem to be valid to me, things like lying and manipulation and infidelity. However, at face value, it's nothing more than that. Why would that be interesting? So is she taking videos down because she's embarrassed about it? No, she's taking them down because of the people she slept with, that she cheated on him with during their relationship, and who they are, and specifically what they can do for her as an entrepreneur. Gaming journalism has reached a low point over the last 5 years. It started with pieces that had nothing to do with gaming or game reviews, nothing to do with software or hardware, nothing to do with events or expos. It started to travel off into the areas of social justice and feminism and opinion pieces and op-eds that had nothing to do with gaming. It started to have authors who were writing pieces condemning the gaming audience as being sexist and misogynistic, as being racist and bigoted, as being overly violent rapists. This has been seen on Kotaku, on Rock Paper Shotgun, on Destructoid, on The Escapist, on any website you can name. This has been transpiring for the last 5 years. It seems more and more these outlier pieces have become the standard, and that the narrative put forward in them has become cohesive and refined, like a talking point targeted at us as the audience. And there's a reason for that. And Zoe Quinn and what's happened over the last 3 days helps to point that out. That is why this is important, and it needs to be talked about. This has nothing to do with her as a person in a relationship. I don't care that Zoe Quinn fucked 5 guys. I don't care that Zoe Quinn cheats on people she's in a relationship with. That's on her. That's her own personal accountability. Her ethical and moral failures as an individual are for her and her partner to deal with. However, when the people she's having an affair with, when the people she's cheating on her boyfriend with, happen to be able to help her career through their actions related to the industry that she's in, then it becomes a piece of public discourse, and it becomes important because it helps to highlight a massive flaw in the Fifth Estate. Now, if you're like me, you've grown up watching mainstream media, television media, die a death. And it didn't just die this death because of the invention of the internet. It died because of its lack of ethical standards. I'd be surprising no one by telling them that Fox News and MSNBC and CNN and every other mainstream media source you can name is corrupt. We've seen this happen, and we've seen the results of their reporting afterwards. Backroom relationships, money changing hands, manipulation, illicit acts have slanted old media to the point where it's unreliable and no one trusts it. So when the Fifth Estate emerged, when we had internet journalism, we felt like we had something we could believe in. We were going to report to each other. We were going to be the honest people. We weren't going to let other outside factors influence truth. But it has not happened that way. And what took a century to kill old media has taken mere years to undermine new media. So let's start at the beginning and see what the hell is going on here, and why this keeps being pushed down, and why nobody's talking about it. Now, Zoe Quinn's notoriety extends quite a ways back. As I stated earlier, she's an indie developer. She released a game on Steam called Depression Quest, and reading the description it states, it is a flash, text-based adventure game about a person living with depression and how situations affect them. Who doesn't want to play a game about being fucking depressed? I rank that right up there with gems like I have the chicken pox and the hit sequel I have shingles now, oh god does it hurt. Yet this is a game she pushed through Greenlight. How did she get it through Greenlight? In fact, how did this game even get on Steam? Well, if you trace this back to its origins, when she was originally developing it, she started to get a lot of press because she was harassed. She was the victim of a sexist campaign by evil denizens of a website called WizardChan. Now, WizardChan, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this website, is a image board dedicated to the movie Hocus Pocus. They are Disney fucking fanatics over at WizardChan. But apparently, they have an issue. They have a major issue with Zoe Quinn and her game. And she went to Twitter, and she went to social media talking about how she's being persecuted and harassed, how people are calling her house and showing up in real life, how it's unnerving her, and how terrible this is. And what do you know? The gaming journalists, gaming press jumped to her rescue. Sites like Gameranks and Kotaku and Rock Paper Shotgun all talked about how brave she was. Even other people with notoriety in the gaming scene right now were sending her messages of encouragement, like Anita Sarkeesian and Dina from the Project Mighty No. 9. Another person who, might I add, fucked her way into a position at a company.
What's going on, guys? Unknown Player here, and today in this video we're going to be rounding up some of my most important and helpful tips for new players, and even some things that veteran players still don't know about Destiny 2. So in a recent video I announced the Zero to Hero challenge that Game invited me to be a part of. This where I essentially trained 5 people who are novices at Destiny 2, and these videos are sort of beginner's guides aimed at those of you who are new to Destiny, because I know there's a lot of you out there. You showed a ton of support on the last video, which is awesome to see so many of you found it helpful. So Game actually announced all 5 of the team members I'll be training. So we have firstly Lucy Hale, Tom Dent, Ed Templar, Steve Williamson, and also Tommy. And this is going to be the team I'll be helping to improve in Destiny 2. So I'll be giving them a challenge, and they have to complete it when the game actually launches. So there's quite a variety of experience inside the group. So in this video, we're going to be going over some of my most important tips for their weaknesses. The last video was a super basic entry-level guide to Destiny 2. We looked at the subclasses, the changes to the weapon system, but in this one we'll be going a little bit more in depth into some of the game mechanics.